Illinois legislature coming back into session slowly, but they've got a budget they've got to tackle, and the prospect of the Trump administration freezing federal funds could mean that legislators are going to look again at some tax increases after we've had consecutive different fee and tax increases on a variety of things all throughout the last 7 years of the Pritzker administration. This is Illinois in Focus Daily. I'm Greg Bishop. Like, subscribe, hit that notification bell, and wake up with us here with Illinois in Focus Daily, only with the Center Square, and then get the headlines in your inbox at thecentersquare.com. So the Pritzker administration, obviously they're running for a third term, and the governor, he's signing legislation on Friday. He signed the Clean Slate Act, a piece of criminal justice legislation, and he also took questions from members of the media on that issue, and also some off-topic questions. But on the issue of the Clean Slate law that he signed, he says that it's important to give people a second chance.
We've seen in the 12 states where Clean Slate has passed, and we know from personal experience that giving people this chance, the chance to be able to get the housing that they need, the education that they need, the job that they're looking for, taking away barriers makes our communities safer.
So the Clean Slate Act, you can read about that at thecentersquare.com. Pritzker talking more about criminal justice reform.
Let's make our communities safer. Let's get people jobs. Let's give people an opportunity to get an education because they've served time already. They've already paid the price for whatever it is that they may have done when they were younger. It's time to give them a second chance.
But a lot of criticism of that law during a fall veto session when this was passed, saying that it's too loose and can possibly lead to people not really being reformed, getting these types of privileges of sorts that the Clean Slate Act lays out. So the governor, obviously holding that news conference, a lot of discussion. He signs the bill and holds it up, and there's, the cameras taking all the pictures. But he was asked several off-topic questions, and one thing that the state legislature is expected to talk about is another constitutional amendment to change the state's flat income tax to allow for a surcharge on millionaires. And what exactly that surcharge will look like is another question. And Pritzker says that when the legislature convenes, they could talk about this, but it's really out of his hands because when a constitutional amendment is proposed by the Illinois legislature, it has to pass both chambers with supermajorities, but the governor doesn't sign it. It then goes to the state board of elections, and they verify it and they put it on the ballot. And then you, the voter, get to choose whether or not to change the state constitution. Again, the governor doesn't sign anything. It's the legislature that acts, asking the voters to make that decision. Now, this happened back in 2020, but the progressive income tax amendment failed. Voters rejected it. And we've got now, 4 years later, a different effort underway for a millionaire's surcharge. What will that be used for? Not sure. Former Governor Pat Quinn has been advocating to have a property tax relief fund use that 3% surcharge from millionaires to then give property tax rebates across the state. Not sure how that actually lowers property taxes in the state of Illinois, which has the highest property taxes in the nation, but still something very much that could be on the table. But the legislature is going to meet. Pritzker says that he's advocated for taxing wealthier people more, and he says that that's something the legislature is going to discuss.
I have said many times publicly, I think you all know, that I believe that we need to have a graduated income tax system. A millionaire's tax would be something like that. And I think that to pay the bills of the state of Illinois, it's fairer if the wealthiest people in the state and the wealthiest corporations in the state pay more than average folks, working folks, and the most vulnerable.
And he says that they can afford it. Millionaires will be able to afford a tax increase.
I know there'll be more discussions and probably some committee hearings about it, and we'll all have to follow along. and see what happens. But my priority is certainly to balance the budget of the state of Illinois in these very, very challenging times with Donald Trump as president of the United States, when they've taken away so many supports frankly, for the most vulnerable people in our society. So we're going to have to make sure we balance the budget.
What that balancing the budget looks like, not too sure at this point. You've got another, 6 months before the budget actually is set to start, so we're midway through. But the legislature is going to be meeting, convening, and discussing these issues, and a whole host of other things as well. Who knows what else they're going to bring up during the spring session, which is starting. Last week, the Illinois Senate came in for only 2 days. They canceled the third day. The Illinois House comes in this week for 3 scheduled days. Today, Tuesday, they'll be in this afternoon. Wednesday, I imagine they'd gavel in and maybe some points of personal privilege and maybe some recognitions on the House floor. And then they'll, adjourn, and maybe some committees will happen. Who knows if they actually are in Thursday when they're scheduled, or if they're going to cancel Thursday. Clearly, we'll be watching all of that at thecentersquare.com. But the governor, talking about other things as well during Friday's news conference, he was asked about the Bears. And of course, this is before the Bears lost to the Rams. They did lose to the Rams, right? You have to forgive me. I do not watch sports. So I don't know. I don't really look at sports headlines at all. So maybe somebody in the chat room can correct me. The Bears lost to the LA Rams, right? So the big question, though, is, are the Chicago Bears going to stay in Chicago? Are the Chicago Bears going to stay in Illinois? It's a big looming question, and what that means for Illinois legislators when they return. Governor J.B. Pritzker says that there's been a lot of headlines written about the Bears, but things are in flux. They're very fluid at the moment.
The Bears, of course, as a result of them playing at Soldier Field and paying rent essentially at Soldier Field, are helping to pay the bills on that. But I just want to be clear that the actual fiscal responsibility, the financial responsibility for that debt does not fall on the Bears. Having said that, we do not want to leave the city of Chicago or the state of Illinois with enormous debt that goes unpaid. And so we have to figure out how that happens.
And he's talking about the loan that is for Soldier Field that was had back in the early 2000s. And I mean, it was like a $600 million loan. And obviously, I mean, they're still paying on it. And what happens if the Bears move? What happens to the millions of dollars that's owed there? Is that going to be on the backs of Chicago and Illinois taxpayers? Is that part of the negotiations the Bears are having with the legislature? Are we going to have some hearings in the public so the public can know what's going on here? But the Bears have looked at Arlington Heights. They've actually purchased land there. And then there's the question about property taxes in Arlington Heights. And can they get some special carve-outs? And then can they have the infrastructure that's needed? $1 billion to build this major entertainment complex in Arlington Heights, Illinois. But then we recently also saw that Indiana is looking to court the Chicago Bears out of Chicago to move to Indiana. So they wouldn't be from the land of Lincoln. They would be from the Hoosier states, and what that's going to look like. But Pritzker says, again, things are continuing to be discussed.
I believe it's best for the Bears to stay in the state of Illinois. I've always said that. I do not think the fans, want the Chicago Bears to be based anywhere else except in the state of Illinois.
All right, so we'll obviously make that something that's going to be talked about at the State House. But clearly, it's not just all the financial issues, it's all of the regulatory issues. You've got businesses that have moved out of Chicago because of taxes. Property taxes are the highest in the country. You had Chicago Mayor Brandon Johnson looking to get a head tax in place. So clearly, this is a debate that's not going to go anywhere. And as we get ready for the budget season for the state of Illinois to really kick into full gear, Governor Pritzker giving his budget speech next month, we'll be talking about it. The Republican candidates for Illinois governor joining in a forum last night at the Gat Guns facility in East Dundee, hosted by the Illinois State Rifle Association. They talked about, of course, the Second Amendment, but they also discussed education and more. I'm Greg Bishop, host of Illinois in Focus Daily here with The Center Square. Go to thecentersquare.com and get the latest. So 4 candidates at the Gat Guns facility in East Dundee last night. I was there. got back at about close to midnight here after a 3.5-hour drive of heading up there over the weekend, testing things out, and then getting a live stream out for our news partners and others to be able to watch that live. And you can actually find the rebroadcast as well if you follow me on Bishop on Air on X. You'll be able to see a link there, or even on Facebook. We'll get a link into the full debate in this video after the live show, so be sure to find that and watch it in its entirety. But you have the four candidates. The four candidates are former State Senator Darren Bailey. You've got Ted Dabrowski, former president of WirePoints, Rick Heidner, a businessman, and DuPage County Sheriff James Mindrick. So four candidates that are going to be on the ballot. There's another candidate that's still listed as active, but he's challenging his name being removed from the ballot, and that's a challenge that's happening in the courts, and that's Joseph Areno. He was not in attendance last night and not invited to the forum. But they started off with actually Darren Bailey's running mate, Aaron Delmar, because Bailey was running a little late in traffic. Here is some of what Aaron had to say to start the forum.
Darren and I are the ones that can take the whole state and unite the Republican Party, because we're the only group that's not just from the North. All four of us from up here. We have a ton of brothers and sisters in Southern Illinois, farmers, agriculture, union members that are prison workers, that work for the Secretary of State, for teachers, all of them that are ruby red Republican. Out of 102 counties in Illinois, 97 of them are bright red. It's just the 7 that hurt the rest of us. But Darren and I are the ones that can take the whole state and unite the Republican Party. I'm excited to be here with these gentlemen because for the first time, we're not killing each other.
That's, again, Aaron Delmar, the running mate for Darren Bailey, as Bailey was a little late to get to the forum last night in East Dundee. But you had others there. You had Rick Heidner, a businessman, newcomer to the Republican, zeitgeist. He laid out why he's decided to run for governor. He's somebody who's made himself a business, and that business has grown substantially, and he has a lot of real estate and rents out to stores all over the state and such. So he talked about how he's seen the economy under Republicans, and he's seen the economy under Democrats, and he says right now things are not looking good for Illinois, and he wants to fix that.
Every single time, especially in the presidential election, okay? Every time there's a Republican in office, I prosper, I build, I do wonderful things. I build buildings and I employ people, and then not only do I employ people, also all the new stores that I open for other people that rent from me, they're employing all kinds of people. But every single time there's a Democrat that comes in office, every single time, all I do is spend those years, of whether it's 4 years or 8 years or whatever it is, trying to save my business. So I hope you understand.
That's, again, Rick Heidner, a businessman, saying that he's running for governor because he's seen that under Democrat leadership, business struggles. Under Republican leadership, he says, businesses thrive. Here is former WirePoints president Ted Dabrowski laying out his intro, and he talked about being the child of parents who immigrated into the United States, one from communist Poland, and saying that really shaped who he is, and his mom coming from South America. He's got a unique perspective. He can speak to the Latino population. He can speak to the Polish population. And he says that he knows how to get people on board with the message of the Dabrowski administration, or the Dabrowski campaign, rather. And he says that he really thinks the Pritzker administration over the past 7 years has made Illinois less.
Last thing I want to say is a closing. You guys have, there's 4 of us here running. You have a choice. And the big choice has to be, let me just clarify. Do we all want Pritzker out of office? Yeah. Okay. If that's the number one goal, you're going to have to figure out who here has the best chance of beating Pritzker. And I'm going to be a little biased and say it's me. I live in Cook County. My running mate's from Cook County as well. She's an ER doctor, works in the safety net hospitals, but she's very principled. We know how to work Cook County in the suburbs. That's number one. I've got the donor base, Chicago, downstate, and DICU line. And together with the grassroots, I need you. We can beat Pritzker. So thank you for being here, and look forward to talking to you more.
So again, the forum last night was all the candidates introducing themselves, and then they were all asked the same question and given time for each individual to respond to that question. And then afterwards, they took like a 10-minute recess and had the attendees of the forum, those watching it live in person, able to go to separate tables of the candidates, almost like an informal straw poll of sorts. I did have to get torn down from the live stream and head back on the highway, and thought I saw some of those northern lights on the way back late. But regardless, the forum touched on, of course, the Second Amendment issues, touched on education, and touched on economic issues. But Darren Bailey did get there eventually during the intro, and they did carve out about 2 minutes for him to give an introduction of himself, despite his running mate being given that opportunity earlier.
I'm the only one here that stood up in the General Assembly and fought for you the entire time. But the interesting thing is I had respect for the people on the other side of the aisle. That value of me serving as a state rep and as a state senator, building trust, maybe not trust, respect. Respect's the word. Because I did the time. I'm the only one here that stood up in the General Assembly and fought for you the entire time. But the interesting thing is I had respect for the people on the other side of the aisle. And friends, 4 years ago when I ran and when we won that primary, everybody else picked up the ball and they went home. Nobody got out to try to turn the vote out. Only 43% of all Illinoisans showed up to vote. That's something we must unite and coalesce, because when we win in November, it is going to send shockwaves across this nation when we stop J.B. Pritzker dead in his tracks.
Again, Darren Bailey ran in 2022 against Governor Pritzker after winning the Republican nomination. Then he had the support of then former President Donald Trump, but Bailey lost to Pritzker, and voter turnout, he's saying, should have been stronger, and the Bailey campaign saying that the lesson they learned is they've got somebody from Cook County and they've got somebody from Southern Illinois, and they believe that they can bridge that gap. So Jim Mendrick, Sheriff of DuPage, he introduced himself being a sheriff and having to go up against the county board on things like masks. He even talked about the issue of the gun ban and how he was a very high-profile figure, saying that he would not enforce the gun ban, and he was not going to go confiscate firearms. And he discussed how he really took a media beating of sorts because of his position on that. But Mendrick also laid out things about education when the question was brought up about education outcomes. And he says, as a county sheriff, he thinks he can manage education better than the state.
What are they doing in our school system for 12 years? So here's the thing. Again, part of my job, I'm in the second biggest county in this state, and I deal with the second biggest jail population, right? So I learn a lot from our criminal element, because these are the people who get arrested in our state and end up in our facility. So over 50% of the people we get, they might be 25 years old, 30 years old, they can't even read or write, right? So I can take somebody illiterate, get them through high school, college, job training in 2 years. What are they doing in our school system for 12 years? I can do this in a correctional facility in 2 years. They can't do it in 12 years in our normal school facilities.
So Mendrick making a point there of, he says, what's been poor education in the state of Illinois. There was a lot of talk about school choice and voucher programs and just accountability and not changing the metrics as to judging success of schools. And Dabrowski talked in particular about a school district in Decatur back in 2022. He elevated that only 2% of the black students could read in fourth grade, and that hasn't changed 4 years later. And he points to the Pritzker administration's handling of the appointees on the State Board of Education and the legislature not following through to have some accountability for that. But a lot of talk about school choice, vouchers, and the like, but also about indoctrination. And so the conversation, wide-ranging last night during the forum. Here is Rick Heidner when they were asked about the Second Amendment. He says that you need the Second Amendment.
Our Second Amendment rights for 250 years, our veterans, our people that have fought for us so that we can defend ourselves and so that we can make sure that our families are safe. We deserve this. Blood was shed. People died. It's impossible for us not to have these rights. And for them to want to, and I'm talking about, obviously we want safety, that's everything, but we have a right to protect ourselves. We have guns. We need to have our guns. We want to protect our family. We all need to do that. We all need to be able to protect ourselves and our family.
And others, of course, as I mentioned, Jim Mendrick, the sheriff of DuPage, pointing to his record, saying that as sheriff, he was among the first to say that he was not going to enforce the state ban on semi-automatic firearms and magazines. And he says he took a lot of flack from the media and the county board. And you had Darren Bailey talk about how he, has been involved in the legislature pushing back on these types of things. And if you recall, Bailey put out a video showing that he was not going to, register his firearms when that law came into enactment. And Ted Dabrowski also talking about public safety when it comes to firearms.
It's pretty obvious what's happening here in Illinois. Two things are happening. Physical security is a major risk. People are not secure anymore physically. Now we're talking about physical security. And it bothers me, and it's something I've written a lot, and I do respect what Darren has done here, but it bothers me so much that our entire public security is a mess, right? Our police, the morale of our police officers is at a dramatic low, with Pritzker not defending it and not backing his police. With Brandon Johnson effectively wanting to get rid of police, we have a real problem. We have prosecutors who won't prosecute, right? If a policeman grabs somebody, arrests them, takes them in, those prosecutors put them right back on the street same day. So there's a lot that has to be done, but obviously on things like PICA, we have to, of course, get rid of it. We have to get rid of all these different laws that are trying to put more liability on the gun makers and trying to take away your rights.
So Mendrick talked about public safety, and as sheriff of the second largest county in Illinois, he says he's got that record to show it.
What my inmates tell me after 7 years of data collection, I am the sheriff of the second biggest county in this state. See, I don't want Purdue kids from a college telling me how to do police work, how to stop gun violence, how to stop crime. They don't know. You know what my inmates tell me after 7 years of data collection? The reason why the carjackings are so high in Illinois is because they know you don't have guns. 13 years, folks. We're the highest murder rate in the entire nation with the most gun laws. It's not working. We know it's as stupid as you, that and we know that this whole law is a joke. We want to avoid that. A piece of plastic should not be able to say you have a right that the Constitution has already given you.
Mendrick mentioning the Void the Void initiative that Bailey says he helped spearhead. But obviously the firearm owner ID card in Illinois required for people to not just purchase firearms or own them, but to purchase ammunition and own it. Established provider overpayments in Illinois for certain welfare programs, $55.7 million in fiscal year 25. And that's an indication of problems within the administration of these welfare funds in the land of Lincoln. Welcome in. It's Illinois in Focus Daily. I'm Greg Bishop, and wake up with us each and every weekday morning for the latest with the Center Square. And you can get headlines in your inbox at thecentersquare.com. Just sign up for the newsletter. been trying to get information from the Illinois Department of Health and Family Services about the amount of overpayments that there have been over the past 5 fiscal years, just to get a sense of what Illinois is looking at with all of the talk about Minnesota fraud in the child care system. So I want to share some stuff with you because just give you a little bit of a behind the scenes of sorts as to how I'm going about trying to get this information. So I put a FOIA request in to the Illinois Department of Health and Family Services, and I'm going to pull this document up. These are my notes, just copied from my email, and this is the response that I got after putting in my Freedom of Information Act request January 2nd. You can read here. It says, Dear Greg Bishop, this correspondence is in response to your FOIA request for public records pursuant to FOIA, which the Illinois Department of Human Services received on January 2nd. Your request seeks to have the following. Through the Freedom of Information Act, I request the Illinois Department of Human Services Division of Early Childhood on all instances of the detection, prevention, reduction, and identification of intentional program violations or fraud by parents or other relative recipients of child care benefits and child care producers for the previous 5 fiscal years, including year-to-date for fiscal year 2026. All instances of the Division of Early Childhood finding fraud, where recovery of improper payments, sanctions, and or criminal prosecutions should include monetary amounts recovered and other sanctions imposed. Please be advised, the FOIA officer, and I think I earlier said Department of Health and Family Services, this is Illinois Department of Human Services, so please be advised that the IDHS Division of Early Childhood received reports of suspected intentional program violation from a variety of sources. Regardless of the source, IDHS DEC investigates, tracks, and processes the reports as an overpayment in the child care management system. While reviewing the overpayment file, IDHS DEC staff and or child care resources and referral agencies may note concerns about intentional program violation or fraud in the case notes or on the overpayment referral form. However, there is no method to independently track which overpayments are intentional or unintentional in CCMS. If IDHS-DEC has sufficient information to determine that an overpayment is warranted, IDHS-DEC will process the overpayment, issue a demand letter to the provider, and refer the case to the IDHS Bureau of Collections to recover the funds. According to IDHS-DEC, there were 1,004 overpayments cases that were referred to the Bureau of Collections during the time frame identified in your request. So 1,004 instances of overpayments from the past 5 fiscal years, including all of up to fiscal year 2026 in the current day. In order to process your request as written, the department would have to manually review the case notes in CCMS for 1,004 overpayment files to determine which ones involved intentional program violations or fraud. Even if this review only took 10 minutes per file, the department would have to spend at least 167 hours conducting the search for responsive records, which would place an undue burden on the operations of the department. Accordingly, the department considers the request as written unduly burdensome. You may wish to narrow this portion of your request, which I did yesterday, only looking for the past fiscal year 2025. And it also goes on to talk a bit more about the process. Even if the process was not unduly burdensome, the department would have to create a new record to satisfy this portion of the request. As previously mentioned, IDHS-DEC does not independently track which overpayment referrals are the result of intentional program violation or fraud and which ones are unintentional. It's interesting how they don't track which ones were fraud and which ones were unintentional when they just compile these documents. The department cannot run a query or otherwise generate a report from a database that isolates only referrals that deal with suspected intentional program violation or fraud. Instead, the department would have to manually review each file and compile a new list of referrals that met the criteria outlined in the request, which would constitute of creating a new record. And they say that by law they don't have to do that. Lastly, please note that there are circumstances in which IDHS-DEC will refer allegations of child care benefit fraud to the Illinois Department of Health Care and Family Services, OEIG. You've got specifically IDHS-DEC referring allegations to the OIG when they are unable to determine if a program violation is intentional without further investigation. In these cases, the OIG Inspector General is responsible for investigating the child care benefit fraud referral and determining whether the allegations substantiated or unsubstantiated. For more information about this, visit that website. Records related to these could be found through FOIA. So I did put another FOIA request in, and we'll see just how long it takes. But it was January 2nd when I put that initial request in, and I didn't get the response until late Friday. So what's going on here? After looking around a bit more at various areas of the state's websites, and in particular the Office of Inspector General for DHS rather, you come across their 2025 annual report. And if you look at the annual report, it shows you some of the issues that they raise here, outcomes of investigations completed. And this isn't just for child care cases. This is for all kinds of cases. Medicaid cases, for instance. So outcomes of investigations completed, provider cases 226, Medicaid cases 220, 6 child care cases. 3 of them were substantiated. So these are improper payments of these dollars, fraudulent, either way, overpayments that were incorrect and not supposed to happen. So 3 of the 6 child care cases in fiscal year 2025 were founded. But here's what's interesting. Established provider overpayments, $55.7 million. And client overpayments, you've got 316,000. Child care program cases, 191,000. SNAP overpayments, 125,000. So you've got these different types of line items here on just how much overpayments there has been. Now, yesterday, Illinois Attorney General Kwame Raoul was holding a news conference about the issue of suing the Trump administration 50 times, and our reporter from the Center Square, Jim Talamonte, was there to ask Attorney General Raoul about these cases, because it's not just from fiscal year 2025 where you have estimated provider overpayments of $55.7 million listed by the OEIG. In the 2024 report, we'll just go to quick search here to see if we can pull up that summary of all of the cases, and you can actually read some of the highlighted cases, not all the cases that are brought up by the OIG Inspector General in these cases. So here's the outcomes of investigations from 2024. You've got 322 investigations completed. You've got substantiated Medicaid cases, 57. Substantiated child care cases, 1. And when it comes to the estimated provider overpayments, $26.4 million. So you've, again, got, that's like $60+ million of established provider overpayments, according to the OIG. Attorney General Kwame Raoul, asked by our reporter Jim Talamonte of what's being done about this. Does the Attorney General go after and prosecute these types of crimes? And I'm just now noticing a small little audio issue with this. So give me 2 seconds here while I work to make sure you guys can hear it down the line.
Prosecute them. And we work with the OEIG. We work with Inspector General from the federal government, HHS. And so when a case is referred to us and we have the capacity to prosecute it, we prosecute. Some of the cases may go to the federal government for prosecution or other prosecutorial agencies, but prosecute them.
So the Attorney General says prosecute them, and we'll see from time to time. The Attorney General might put out something about prosecution against an elected official, for instance, in a small village somewhere. But it seems that when you look at child care fraud cases, at least when we've searched news headlines from years past, it seems that federal prosecutors are the ones that are really going after this. But when you've got the state's Inspector General looking into this issue and the child care assistance program funding, I mean, just an example of what they're able to find, and we'll pull this back up in the 2025 annual report. Mother failed to report marriage and cohabitation with children's father, resulting in child assistance program overpayments overpayments of $35,000. So that's just one particular case that they highlight. But again, when you had 3 substantiated, they only put 1 in there. I'd also like to see more information. And this is why my Freedom of Information Act request is important, because the OIG is only putting out, brief snippets. What about the provider overpayments that there were? Because that as well is important to highlight, because it's not just the provider overpayment cases where there were 6 and they had 3 substantiated. It's the beneficiary overpayments as well, where they had 6 cases brought forward, but only 2 were substantiated, with some being sent to be prosecuted. So obviously you've got a lot of concern about how your tax dollars are being used when it comes to these welfare programs. And it's not just the child care program that the IG is finding problems with cases being reported and investigated, and some overpayments and fraud. You've got SNAP overpayments as well that's being found by the OIG. Governor J.B. Pritzker yesterday being asked about child care money, and he says that the state needs more of it.
Folks, we are not providing enough child care, even with all the resources that we've put, and I've significantly increased the amount of child care in the state. And this is at a moment when we're seeing the federal government take money away from child care. So I'm always frustrated by the inability to get to the ultimate goal that we have, which is universal preschool and universal child care. And that's ultimately what we're aiming at.
How do you pay for that, with the state constantly talking about having tight budgets despite increased spending every year under the Pritzker administration, which requires different types of tax and fee increases? State Representative Brad Halbrook said that the efforts to try to increase taxes on millionaires or other taxes is not going to work. People continue to leave. Here's Halbrook on the House floor yesterday.
The people have already voted. They've said no, and yet again, here we are. The Democrats are after a new income tax once again. Another session, another tax hike, another attempt to force through what the voters have already rejected. After watching families pack up and leave, after watching thousands of businesses leave, after losing nearly 100,000 people in just 1 year.
He went on to talk about how tax increases aren't going to work.
As the bleed out of Illinois continues, the majority party keeps treating the symptoms with higher taxes instead of fixing the disease. Respect the people who pay the bills. Respect the voters who have already answered this question. And let's stop pretending this next tax hike will save us, because it never has and it never will.
We'll keep you posted on the ongoing investigation of, obviously now founded child care overpayments and fraud, and how that's being investigated and where those cases are. Can we get some information from the departments that handle this, and actual substantive information to see, where this is tripping up?
SNAP rate under the governor has gone from 6% to 11%. That's money that is going to places that it shouldn't be. Why not work to reduce that instead of blaming Donald Trump and the Republicans on the national level, saying it's their fault? No, the buck stops with the governor and the majority party. They've had majority rule for 5 decades minus 2 or 3 years. It's time that they actually do something.
Illinois House Minority Leader Tony McCombie addressing members of the media earlier this week as Republicans held their news conference to update to taxpayers on what's going on with their spending plan and the various priorities that there may be at the State House with competing interests and a whole host of other things. It is Illinois in Focus Daily. I'm Greg Bishop with you each and every weekday morning as we break down what's going on to keep you informed as taxpayers. All right, so we've got the ongoing conversations about the spending, and the governor yesterday putting out a press release spelling out that they have found some reserves. So here's the governor's news release. It says that following Governor J.B. Pritzker's executive orders directing state agencies to prepare for federal economic disruptions, the governor's Office of Management and Budget releasing its fiscal year 26 budget reserves list, identifying funds with the current fiscal year 26 enacted budgets that agencies have been directed to reserve to help mitigate fiscal risk amid ongoing economic uncertainty driven by the Trump administration. Last September, the governor says that he directed state agencies to identify up to 4% of their fiscal year 26 general funds appropriations and to have those as reserves and safeguard against potential federal funding changes and broader economic risks. The governor's executive order also directs agencies to begin limiting non-essential spending purchases and travel priority, only essential roles for hiring. So you've got $481 million, and they say that no funding for pension or K through 12 education was impacted, but you can see here the breakdown of the nearly $500 million the governor's office says they've found inefficiencies. Healthcare and Human Services, $36.15 million, higher education, $30.5 million, public safety, $22 million, economic development, environment and culture, $10.3 million, and government services, $57.2 million. Now, the governor is set to deliver his budget address coming up in the next 3 weeks, and that is going to be revealing as to what exactly he plans to share in the plans for spending your tax dollars. And the governor has increased spending by $16 billion in the past 7 years, 40+% spending increase. You've seen tax increases go up and up and up and up. You've seen the ongoing issue of fee increases and questions about government spending. So clearly those are ongoing questions that are going to be raised as the discussions continue on, is the governor's administration of state agencies appropriate? Is it being done efficiently? Why is it that we now have this executive order coming into effect to find those funds? Here is State Representative Amy Ellick from earlier this week. She laid out what she believes is problematic when it comes to transparency on how state tax dollars are being spent.
We were hopeful last fall with the governor's executive order that would force agencies to identify waste or redundancies within their agency. Instead, when we sought answers about their work through a FOIA request, that request was denied. That's not reform, that's avoidance and political theater using official executive orders.
So Ellick saying that they tried to find out exactly where the governor was looking to cut, but they couldn't get that information via FOIA. And literally hours after Ellick revealed that, again, you get this news statement from the governor talking about $500 billion in efficiencies in state spending. Governor Pritzker earlier this week, before releasing that, says he has a pretty good idea of where they're going to have to find some savings.
I can say I'm pretty well aware of where we need to go, what resources are necessary, and the challenges that we face today. I mean, we have to balance the budget in the face of Donald Trump taking money away from the state, and then continue to march toward the progress that we want in early childhood.
So the governor clearly raising, the issue of being on top of spending and making sure that they have the savings where they can find them. You have Leader McCombie, Tony McCombie, House Republican leader. She talked about the budget process and just how important it is that it's transparent.
Well, flat or lower would be ideal. There's been, since I got here in 2017, it was $36 billion for our general revenue fund. So that's certainly something that I hope there's no pork projects. I hope we're not going to fund illegal immigrants. Those would be a couple things. You could do some serious cuts. I hope they don't put another $40 million in Proviso High School.
And what that, the pork projects, the member district projects, these are obviously things that we're going to have discussions about as we get closer to the end of the fiscal year and the start of a new budget. And our taxpayers actually going to see those plans beforehand. It's a big question. But Governor J.B. Pritzker says that he's going to be discussing this in about 3 weeks, and he puts a lot of the blame on the Trump administration for what he says is cuts to human services.
The minute that we heard that Donald Trump was trying to take away child care from the state of Illinois, remember he picked 5 states and decided we're going to take these basic things that people need just to survive away. But he picked 5 blue states, states with Democratic governors. We immediately got a TRO to stop him from doing that. And of course, there'll be a case that will follow through. He's got no right. And it's clear from the law that, you know, when you want to take funding away from a state like this, there are processes for determining whether or not that funding should be taken away. They did none of that. It was just like an announcement to punish his political opponents. And so I just want to be clear, we're going to continue to fight him in court. We're continuing to accept funding from the federal government because they've been pushed back on by the court. And then we're doing everything we can to fund at the state level to continue to allow people to get child care and early childhood education. But as I said earlier, so much more to do.
And you know, we've been looking into just how much mispayments or overpayments there are for child care. And we found that over 1,000 instances of overpayments in the state's child care system were had over the past 5 years. Which ones of those were fraud, we can't really tell. And that's another problem that Leader McCombie, the House Republicans, raises, is that there's not really much follow through with audit findings of not being able to track where your tax dollars are going. And you see these audit findings across the board. It's not just the child care funding, it's the Supplemental Nutrition Assistance Program money. McCombie saying that these audits seem to just sit on a desk somewhere.
I was on the audit commission, and Amy is now. Every year, every audit, or however often they have them, every new director sits at that table and defends the repeat findings by saying, well, I wasn't the director at that time, so this isn't going to, literally every single time. We should be looking within our own agencies. Yes, is it hard with the uncertainty? Absolutely. But the governor should also be open to having these things looked at. He should be doing it, not relying on the federal government to do it or the audit commission. He should be doing it himself, because those funds can be spent in a better place with our most vulnerable, instead of like our SNAP rate. Our SNAP rate under the governor has gone from 6% to 11%. That's money that is going to places that it shouldn't be. Why not work to reduce that instead of blaming Donald Trump and the Republicans on the national level saying it's their fault? No, the buck stops with the governor and the majority party. They've had majority rule for 5 decades minus 2 or 3 years. It's time that they actually do something.
What that actually looks like with the Democrats in the majority, are they going to shore up spending? Are we going to see the same level of spending? How's that going to ultimately play out for you, the taxpayer? As it's been the past few weeks, we continue to wait to see what the U.S. Supreme Court's going to do about a case challenging Illinois and Cook County's gun and magazine ban. It is Illinois in Focus Daily. I'm Greg Bishop as we track what happens with the challenges against Illinois' gun laws, and in particular, the gun ban that went into effect January of 2023. Can you believe it? It's been almost 3 years since that was signed into law. Actually, I think it was January 11th of 2023 when it was signed into law. Lawsuits followed thereafter, and you had other lawsuits challenging local bans that then wrapped in the state ban into those challenges. And one of those cases, the case out of Cook County challenging the Cook County and statewide ban, has made it all the way through the judiciary. And now it's in front of the U.S. Supreme Court, and whether or not they're going to take it, we could find out next week. Again, welcome back. It's Illinois in Focus Daily. I'm Greg Bishop. You can get the headlines in your inbox each and every weekday morning by going to thecentersquare.com and signing up for that newsletter. For those watching live, you've got people checking back in about the lip sync issues, and we'll see if the reset did anything before we have to do some more technical stuff. But regardless, if you can hear us, it's good. You can listen to the podcast really anywhere you get podcasts. Just search Illinois in Focus. But we'll also have segments of the show, corrected audio sync, for you to catch up on later. So let's get to this. Veramontes, the case out of Cook County. This is probably the 3rd or 4th time it's been relisted going into conference to the U.S. Supreme Court. So when a case makes it all the way from the district courts through the appeals court and onto the U.S. Supreme Court on the merits. People ask the Supreme Court, can you take this case? The Supreme Court then goes into what they call a conference, and it's behind closed doors, and the justices discuss all of the different cases that they've been requested to take, and then they have an orders list that follows typically the Monday after, and that spells out which cases they are taking and which cases they are denying. And when there's no case on that list, like Veramontes, when we've checked the orders list, it's not on the orders list. That just means it's being relisted to go back to conference. And earlier this week, it was listed to go back to conference today. So the U.S. Supreme Court conferencing on Veramontes again today. Could we find out what happens? We'll be watching next week. But you still got the other case, the Barnett case, challenging Illinois' gun ban that a district judge has found unconstitutional. The appeals court is still dealing with that particular challenge, and we have yet to get any kind of certainty on that. But it's been pretty busy as well at the Supreme Court. They did decline to take up a felony firearms case. This coming from Andrew Rice, the Center Square's reporter out of Washington, D.C. U.S. Supreme Court Tuesday declining to hear 2 cases over whether individuals with felony records can be permanently disarmed under the Second Amendment. The court declined to hear one case and another challenging target laws that ban individuals with felonies from possessing firearms. And so that case, obviously something that is being dealt with locally, and the Supreme Court's not taking them. But you also have the Hawaii case that the U.S. Supreme Court had, and you had advocates outside the U.S. Supreme Court looking for more clarity as they were hearing that case. Now, the Hawaii case, Wolford v. Lopez, challenges a Hawaii law that prevents concealed carry permit holders from going to gas stations, bars, restaurants, and serve alcohol, beaches, and public parks without written or verbal consent from the property owner. So during the arguments Tuesday, gun rights advocates came out to the steps of the Supreme Court to express support for the Second Amendment. An argument analysts were particularly watching was drawing distinctions between free speech rights and gun rights on private property and open to the public. So this is going to be interesting what the U.S. Supreme Court does with this case, especially after hearing it. Here is what some advocates on the U.S. Supreme Court steps had to say about the issue.
So the default rule, basically the state says firearms are prohibited at private property otherwise open to the public. So grocery stores, that sort of thing. And we think that's overreach for the government to say that. Private property owners certainly have the right to prohibit firearms on their own property, but it's gross overreach for the government to decide that for them.
So clearly a lot of questions going to be answered by the U.S. Supreme Court whenever they do put out their ruling on the Hawaii case. And while all of that's going on in the courts, and again, I know it's been frustrating for a lot of the readers out there and the listeners, is how long it's taking for the case to get through the judiciary all the way up to the U.S. Supreme Court, and the indecision by the appeals court in the Barnett case, and week after week after week after week of indecision from the U.S. Supreme Court. Clearly, there are going to be ongoing concerns about all of this. So where do you go from here? Well, you got to keep an eye out for other legislation that could be coming down the pike. At thecentersquare.com, you can see the story. Illinois Rifle Act sparks fierce debates as lawmakers return. This coming from our contributor, Katrina Barker, about House Bill 3320. Now, this is the Responsibility in Firearm Legislation Act. And whether or not this advances is not sure. It's still stuck in committee. So it would require firearm manufacturers operating in Illinois to obtain a new state permit and pay fees tied to the estimated cost of gun violence. This measure, again, if you click through the actual bill, you'll be able to see and exactly where this is at. Yeah, I'll accept the Illinois legislature's cookies. You've got a lot of people signing up for it, right, and sponsoring it, but it's still stuck in committee. You can see here the last action. It's stuck in committee, and that's despite having all of these co-sponsors added. So this is something to watch, and after it possibly moves out of the Rules Committee, where could it go from here? Big questions, and that's why you got to stay tuned here with the Center Square and Illinois in Focus Daily. All right.